Joined now by our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. What's your reading of how things are going at the moment?
Well, this has not been a pretty night for the Conservatives. Very clearly, there have been some totemic losses, particularly within London, as you were mentioning, Wandsworth, Westminster and indeed Barnet. These were three councils that the Conservatives had hoped to at least keep one of last night, but clearly have not been able to do so. So Labour having a very good night in the capital. However, when we look a little bit beyond London and we look to places, for example, up in the North, Hartlepool, where the Conservatives have gained, if we look across to situations like Thurrock, where the Conservatives have also picked up seats. Outside the sort of metropolitan centre, the Conservatives are making small gains. So there's a bit of a mixed picture over the course of the night. However, the big qualifier is that these seats were last elected in 2018. So that's actually, if we're looking at places like Hartlepool that the Conservatives gained later on, you'd expect them to pick up some seats. So really, it's a very mixed and quite messy picture outside of London. Clearly, the Labour Party doing well. The big question, though, is are the Labour Party doing well enough to win a general election? Because they don't just have to overturn what went on in 2019, but of course the Labour Party lost in 2017 as well. It lost in 2015 and it lost in 2010. There's a huge mountain for the Labour Party to climb if they want to win the next election. And are the gains they're making enough is the question in order to do that.
In terms of the other parties, though, it's interesting, isn't it, that we've seen, it's got to be said, a very good night for the Lib Dems. Pretty impressive night for the Greens as well.
Certainly, if we're looking at some of these smaller parties, they do tend to do better outside of the normal parliamentary cycle of general elections. The Lib Dems are traditionally incredibly good at digging in local communities, in by-elections and in local council elections. And clearly there have been many people who want to give the Conservative Party, the government, a bit of a thumping yesterday. And whether that's on issues of Partygate, whether that's on issues of the global financial situation, the issues of inflation that we're experiencing right now, clearly people felt that other parties were the way to go in many areas, in the southwest in particular.
Yeah, people vote differently in local elections, don't they? It's sort of almost as though that's where you do a protest vote.
It's certainly safer to vote. You're not going to change the government by the way that you vote in a local election. You might very well send the government a message in the same way that you would do in a by-election. And actually the Lib Dems' messaging in some of these by-elections where they've been very successful in Conservative areas, in what they're calling the blue wall, as opposed to the red wall up in the Midlands and the North, the blue wall down in the South and the sort of leafy suburbs and home counties. The Lib Dems often on their literature during by-elections would say, you're not going to change the government, but you will send them a message. And that potentially is what people have been thinking now as well, as the Lib Dems do pick up in those areas.